So the mile-high view is there's a historic struggle that's been going on for decades, maybe for generations, of whether the Postal Service will remain public, as the law clearly said, or whether it's going to be taken over by private entities for private profit. So it's really a struggle between service to the people and the public good versus individual greed. So let me put up another slide for you from a Wall Street Journal article from many years ago, just to make it clear this is not about just the moment today. So this was an article from 2011, Junking the Junk Mail Post Office. This was in the Wall Street Journal, and it was a major op-ed. And so here's what the writer said. In addition to rejecting a bailout and permitting bankruptcy, our political leaders should end the USPS's dysfunctional first-class mail monopoly, opening it up to private competition. This will pave the way for the tough restructuring decisions that need to be made by USPS management, the American Postal Workers Union, advertisers, and other stakeholders. Well, guess who this was? It was by a man named McDougal, and he was a 30-plus year sitting member of the board of directors of guess who? UPS, United Parcel Service. It is a struggle, and it's no accident what we're facing today. We also go back to the Office of Management budget under the 2016-2020 Trump first administration. OMB is the Office of Management budget. This is the White House. And OMB then was headed up by a man named Vogt, I may be saying it wrong, who's none other than one of the leaders of the Heritage Foundation and none other than one of the architects, the main architect of what we know now as Project 2025. This was in writing, 2018, from the White House. They talk about preparing it, meaning the Postal Service, for future conversion from a government agency into a privately held corporation. So we share that to make it clear that there's a thread here. This just didn't come out of the blue. And then I mentioned the Heritage Foundation already, which is considered a conservative think tank. Here's what they said for the last 40 years, calling for postal privatization. And I'm not going to read it all to you. But even in 2023, the government should sell off the post office and allow it to run as a private business. There it is. FedEx, UPS, and other companies deliver packages and remain profitable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then we have President Trump himself, after he won re-election or a second election in this period, with all the talk about privatization, here he is himself, if he could run that.
Well, there is talk about the Postal Service being taken private. You do know that. Not the worst idea I've ever heard. Really isn't. You know, it's a lot different today with between Amazon and UPS and FedEx and all the things that you didn't have. But there is talk about that. The idea that a lot of people have liked for a long time. We're looking at it. I think we're looking at that along with a lot of that.
And if you can take that back down, thanks. And it is an idea that some people have liked for a long time. The likes of the Heritage Foundation, UPS. In December, the Washington Post, the liberal Washington Post, so-called, now owned by Bezos of Amazon, had a major editorial that if the government wants to start with efficiency, with all this talk about government efficiency, start with the United States Postal Service. There it is right there. President-elect Trump has expressed a keen interest in privatizing the U.S. Postal Service in recent weeks, etc. But then they themselves not just reported on it. 4 days after this article, they had a major lead editorial from the Washington Post editorial board. And then, while we don't have a slide on it, just today, it was circulated a news story from Wells Fargo. And you may remember Wells Fargo was the corrupt bank that they are. And you say, well, why do banks care? You know, what is this? And they raise in this new, I think it's an investors report, not only how they would like to get their hands on the wonderful real estate that the post office owns if it was privatized, but they actually say USPS parcel rates would likely be materially raised, increasing the floor for U.S. package delivery. The USPS parcel pricing was 25% to 60% below FedEx and UPS. To reach pricing parity with parcel competitors, USPS needs to increase parcel rates by 30% to 140%, depending on product line. That's part of what they're after. APWU family, this national treasure that's owned by the public generates $82 billion a year in revenue that these Wall Streeters and the Wells Fargos cannot easily touch. They want it for themselves. And when we talk about, and this is important for the public as we fight this out over the coming weeks, months, and years, that the Postal Service is the low-cost anchor of the entire mailing package industry, which clearly from Wells Fargo's own financial figures shows that we help every single person in the country that engages in some kind of package exchange in any kind of e-commerce. And not just, that doesn't just include the individual, it includes the businesses that are, and particularly the small businesses that are engaged in e-commerce. So Wells Fargo really said it all. So that's kind of the mile high view, okay? But so let's talk about a little bit of what's going on now. It's not just us, APWU family. And it's important for us to remember that it's happening right now. We consider it a coup, taking over government agencies, taking over independent agencies as the post office are attempting to, that I'll talk about more. But basically, they're using billionaires to hollow out the federal sector, and with it comes hollowing out of services that the people of this country rely on and need and pay taxes for, really, right? Elon Musk is running rampant. And he's talking about DOGE, Doge. And by the way, the best we can tell, I know it's on lots of people's minds, Doge is not yet, from all the indications we have, despite all the rumors, has not yet entered the postal headquarters. But we expect him to, and we're gonna deal with that if it happens, and we're ready to deal with it legally. But remember when Elon Musk and the people around him are talking about government efficiency, what they're really talking about is not government efficiency. He's in the press saying we saved $55 billion. Well, if you read the article, they canceled $55 billion of contracts, but then he wants those contracts. So there's an article in today's Washington Post that Musk's empire is built upon billions in government funds. Think about that. He's already got $38 billion government contracts. And the article goes into how low interest loans from the government build his business and build his wealth. So now, for example, think about this. He wants Starlink, which is his company, to take over the Federal Aviation Administration, run by the government. They want to shift it over to the private sector, just like Wells Fargo and UPS wants to shift our work and our mission over to the public sector. So let's talk about, and it's very important too, that we realize whatever we do in defense of postal workers, the post office itself, the people of the country, it's very important that we stand in solidarity with everybody else who's under attack. Solidarity, we can't expect people here to be here for us if then we're not here for each other, and vice versa. And we have to break through this divide and conquer tactic. That's how the ruling class rules. But this is a wedge between the private sector workers, and they're trying to put that wedge between private sector workers and public sector workers as somehow we, the public sector workers providing these services, are ripping off the rest of the people of the country. So let's talk a little bit about what a takeover from the Commerce Department would look like. And first off, be very clear that if they actually do an executive order to take it over, it's illegal. Now that doesn't mean that this administration is not going to try it, because there's very few guardrails. The Supreme Court is very conservative, and they're testing every limit. But it's illegal. The law is clear. I put up the first part of it where it's created by Congress. 39, code, USC code, 39 USC code, right? It's created by Congress. That means Congress has to change it, not an individual, not a billionaire, not me, not anybody who's elected president. It's Congress. So number one, it's illegal. And within the law, it was purposely set up in 1971 after the Great Postal Strike. It was part of the result of the strike to depoliticize the United States Postal Service. And that's where it went from a post office department with a cabinet position just appointed by the president, nominated by the Senate, to a board of governors that would then have 9 governors, 5 from one party, 4 from the other. Make it nonpartisan. Make the terms long enough so they encompass more than one presidential term, let's say. So there's some consistency. And in the law, it says only the board of governors, nominated by the president, confirmed by the Senate, can fire or hire the PMG. And that's what's there. So anything that does away with that is clearly a violation of law. Doesn't mean they're not going to do it. Okay? But that's what it does. Now, a hostile takeover may not take that form. And let's realize they're pretty clever. So they may say, well, the Commerce Department is just going to get it working right. But the Commerce Department politicizes the Postal Service. So, for instance, Ludnick, who's the Commerce Secretary, was on Fox News last night saying, well, we can just do new stuff like the census. Well, all of us on this call would love to do new work, whether it's helping out with the census, which would be more carrier work, or other things. But where does it connect that because Commerce Department wants us to do some of their work, that they have to take us over? We do passports. Does that mean the State Department has to take us over? Obviously not. So we have to see through the BS, for lack of a better word, when they start raising this stuff. Well, we just want to get it working right. We just want to provide some government services, which may save some money if we run it through the post office. So very concerning for all of us. If there's a hostile takeover, what happens to the service in time? What happens to our jobs? What happens to our union contracts? What happens to our retirements? What happens to all of our benefits? And that's a lot of what's on the line. The Commerce Department taking this over would be a huge step towards postal privatization, period. May not happen immediately. They're not stupid. They may keep delivering mail for a year or two. They may still send it to rural areas for a little while. But guess what, folks? This is a death spiral of the billionaires grabbing what belongs to the people of the country. And also, it's interesting, I'm not going to spend a lot of time tonight, but if you go back to the Postal Task Force report of the first term of President Trump, that task force, you had the OMB report that said prepare it for selling it off and breaking it up, but the task force laid out increasing outsourcing rather than bringing work in, both in processing and transportation, breaking the mail into essential and non-essential, interesting thought, that would destroy us, reducing days of delivery, eliminating postal workers' collective bargaining rights, part of the task force from the first Trump administration, reducing postal workers' retirement benefits and making it easier to close post offices. That is what the task force has already called for. And if they take full control of the post office, this is what we can fully expect from them. To start breaking it up, preparing it to sell off, maybe pieces at a time. And privatization, this is something I think that's very important for us. It doesn't have to take the path of pure legislation saying, okay, post office, you've got it, and we're turning it all over to Commerce and UPS and FedEx and Amazon. It can take place piecemeal. So we do, for instance, have a lot of people in our ranks, and you probably heard from them. What are we talking about all this privatization stuff for? You've been talking about for years, APW, and we're still standing. But what that leaves out is we're still standing because we're union and union strong. We have great allies. The people of the country support the post office and trust us. And we've been able to fight back effectively. But it doesn't mean that this is not a historic threat and a historic battle. And I will also submit to you, if we're honest about it, that they have succeeded in privatizing large parts of the post office. The whole pre-sort discounts bypasses, enriches the private companies, gives them special discounts. They sort the mail, they bypass our plants, they bypass our trucks, and they bring it to the last mile. APW family, that's a form of postal privatization. And if the Commerce Department takes it over and they implement these task force recommendations, all of that stuff in terms of the sorting stuff, transporting outside of our system is going to go on steroids. It's also going to affect our union rights. We hear from people, well, if we're privatized, I'll still have a job and I'll still have my contract. Sorry, folks. Our contract is between the American Postal Workers Union and the United States Postal Service. It's not between us and Amazon. It's not between us and Pitney Bowes. It's not between us and DHL. It's not between us and UPS. It's with the Postal Service. And if it's sold off, our contract or the pieces that get sold off, those workers will not be covered under our contract. We won't have no layoff protections. We won't have step increases. We won't have COLAs. We won't have a grievance procedure. We won't have the limits on accessing. Just cause protections. All the wonderful things have been won through generations of struggle of postal workers. So think about that as we think about our future. Now, so our bargaining rights are going to be clearly under attack. And our crafts may be the most vulnerable initially, because if they don't go for broke right away, we believe there's a good chance they're going to try to completely subcontract or at least much more subcontracting in the mail processing side. That's our clerk jobs. That's our maintenance jobs. That's our transportation jobs. That's the well-being of our communities, because we all know on this call that good jobs, good union living wage jobs help build good communities. And all of those things are going to be at stake. So I already talked a little bit about those that are crying wolf. Be prepared to talk to our coworkers. That we're not making this stuff up. That's why we showed you some of the things in the beginning of this presentation about the historic battle of these Wall Streeters trying to get their greedy hands on this public money. And one of the ways, if they ever do it, they make money. What do? They lower wages, lower benefits, reap the profits, and laugh all the way to the bank. And in other countries where they privatize, prices go up, service goes down, good jobs get destroyed. And you know, there's going to be more closing of post offices because there's this theory that every post office has to make its own money. Well, that doesn't work in a system like ours. We know if we're going to serve everybody on an equal basis, no matter where we live, that wonderful universal service obligation, that's going to be gone. That's going to be gone. And there's nothing else that keeps post offices open unless it's part of the public system. And we understand that, yes, in rural America, a post office may not be able to make money on its own, but it all gets balanced out in a system. And that's how we serve everybody. Internationally, just a couple examples. In Great Britain, the United Kingdom, when they privatize, now stamps cost. This is just a first class stamp going within a much smaller country than ours. It costs more than $2 now. In Portugal, after privatization, they closed half of the post offices and reduced delivery days to 3 days a week. These are the kind of things that the people of the country need to know about when all of these other people are talking about the wonderful things of privatization, because they can do it better than we can. So I want people to think about, yes, we got serious challenges, but we can win APWU. It's not going to be easy. It's not guaranteed. I talked about our power coming from our members, but we have other postal unions, we have the labor movement, we have tremendous allies amongst the people of the country. So, you know, we beat Staples, post office on Staples. We beat them on Sears. In 2020, heading into an election in the middle of a pandemic, we had 800 rallies throughout the country. We won postal reform. We won COVID relief for the post office. We won safety provisions for the workers that worked in the pandemic the best we could. It's not hopeless, and I don't want anybody, I want all of us to be aware of the challenges and the seriousness of the times, but I don't want anybody to be discouraged that somehow these you-know-whats are so powerful that we can't fight back and win. They're not, and we can. So we're gonna unite with the 4 postal unions where we can. We're gonna rally our friends in Congress on both sides of the aisle. We're gonna have some special attention on rural America, because when you deal with rural America, you're largely dealing with Republican representatives in Congress. And rural America has we all have a special relationship to the post office, but rural America even has a deeper relationship, because what we know is no private company is gonna move mail and packages if they can't make money. And that's gonna leave out huge swaths, tens of millions of people of this country. So I wanted to share with you what we've done so far so you get a feeling for that. We're not trying to do everything on day one, because we know this struggle is not a one-day struggle. So now I got to find my list here to all of you. Thanks for hanging in. Pretty soon I'll get to Judy, so you won't have to listen to me the whole time. But I want you to know that in our executive board meeting in January, unanimously, the executive board that you're seeing on the call with me voted sizable, serious funds of the dues paying members. That's where it comes from, and this is what it's for, to deal with this fight back, whether it's through advertising, whether it's through buses and rallies, whatever it is, more staff, more help, whatever it is, that's what that money's for. And we're serious and we're united, and we want you to be just as serious and united. We put out a statement on day one on the website that's had tons of people going to it, including the press, to put our flag in the sand, so to speak, in the ground. This is wrong. We're going to fight back. We've generated calls, thousands of calls to the Senate. Stop this, protect hands off the public postal service. We're promoting House Res 70. I'm going to hold off on that because Judy Beard will talk more about that, as well as an effort having a joint letter with the other unions to Congress. We've already appeared on major TV networks. We're going to continue to do that. And we spread that message also in our own social media world, as well as our allies have. We're going to later talk about a letter drive that we have. We joined a rally the other day that the NALC sponsored in DC. We're updating and reactivating a Grand Alliance to Save the Public Postal Service. 80 national organizations, civil rights organizations like the NAACP, labor organizations like the teachers and firefighters, social justice organizations like Jobs with Justice, and veterans organizations like Vote Vets. We're all part of that. But it was an old statement. And in all fairness to these organizations, we wrote a new statement. We're no longer talking about Patrick Donahoe from 10 or 12 years ago. So we're in the process now. It's already in the mail and on the internet. Notice I said in the mail and on the internet, where we're asking all of the organizations to sign on again. And that becomes an organizing tool, because every national organization that's on there, most of them, also have local chapters, people who are locally involved, and we can involve and activate our allies in the local area as well. We are in the process of polling. We hired outside professional polling firms, a liberal and a conservative firm together, working on a poll amongst the people of the country, not our members. But we want to see how the people of the country are feeling. That has an impact on how we frame our message, may have an impact on how we decide to rally or not rally. It may have an impact of how we deal with our letters to the editor and our op-eds and our TV and social media advertising. We expect the results of that within 2 weeks or so. We've activated our advertising firm to start working on ads. We're going to get them ready, because when we're ready to move, we have to move. We're supporting the Board of Governors. I've already talked to a few of them personally, and we're going to have an action ask later. The Board of Governors of the United States Postal Service. Forget how you feel about them, forget other things. They have taken so far, according to the press, a good stand. And they are prepared, at least initially, if there's an attempt with a potential executive order to seize the post office, they're going to go into court. We want to help, and when somebody raised this from the field with me, and it's a heck of a good idea, we want to help give them a spine. So we're going to ask all of you to send a simple one sentence, two sentence thing. We appreciate your stance in support of the independent character of the public postal service. They need to know that the people are behind them, so that they stay as firm as possible. We've initiated meetings with the 4 union presidents. That was our initiative. It's not always easy, because we have natural differences on jurisdiction and other things, but at this time we have to do our very best to pull together. And we are also in the process of actually reaching out to the management associations. That same supervisor, idiot supervisor that's writing us up 2 months ago, might be somebody we're out with on a rally to defend the public postal service. So we do have to think out of the box. Today we mailed to the locals some talking points. It's not the end of the talking points, but when people talk to the press, when people are thinking about a letter to the editor, when people are thinking about talking to each other, we have put out some basic talking points. We have a lot of media and digital work going on. We have legal strategies in place. It's easy for me to say, well, let's just file a lawsuit. Doesn't always work that way. We have to have standing. There was a major lawsuit in the unions on the AFGE side and other federal unions where they had a case thrown out. And they're being decimated, and we've got to stand with them every minute we can. But the judge ruled that they actually did not have, quotes, legal standing. One of the areas we're ready to move, and if anybody on this call has proof, get it to us ASAP. The minute DOGE comes into the post office, unelected, I mean, think about that. I'm jumping back to Elon Musk, apparently the new president of the United States. He said nobody voted for him, right? When DOGE comes in, if they come in looking for any information that is private information, social security numbers, financial data, all the things that the post office has about us, we are ready now to go into court for a temporary restraining order, and we will do that. So those are some of the things, APWU family, that we've been working on. And maybe what I should do is I want to talk about the road ahead and some of the things we have in place and we would like you to do. I may have answered some of the questions along the way, maybe not, but let me turn it over to Sister Judy Beard, our Legislative Political Director, to talk about a little bit of what's at play with some of the attacks on our benefits, some of the things, a little more on House Res 70 and what that means for us in this moment, and a few other things. And then I'll come back and talk about some of the things that we have in place moving forward that we are going to make, call upon all of you to get involved with. So, Sister Beard, it's wonderful to have you on. I know that, like the rest of us, you and your staff have been on short sleep, trying to deal with this crisis. And again, we know it's not a one-day crisis or one-week crisis, but thanks for joining us tonight, and I'll turn it over to you to share some of the important information and insight you have with the thousands of people who are on this webinar and this call tonight. Judy, take it away.
Thank you, President Demosthenes, and hello to my union family. As many of you are aware, the United States House of Representatives voted just 2 days ago on a budget resolution. I got several phone calls about it. It passed by a very slim margin, 27 yes and 217 yes and 215 no. The resolution called for a blueprint or framework in the which is the first step to accomplish President Trump's budget goals. And so you call to find out, what does this mean? This budget resolution that was just passed 2 days ago called for $4.5 billion in tax cuts for the rich. Cuts, and $2 trillion in government spending cuts over the next 10 years for all of us. I'm gonna repeat that. $4.5 trillion for tax cuts for the rich. And then a cut, $2 trillion in government spending on other programs. Which federal programs they're gonna cut? That's what the question you've asked me. What budget programs are they gonna cut? Yes, federal and postal are some of the programs that they're thinking about cutting. There was a 50-page document, which was created by some of the members of the House Budget Committee that lays out some suggestions. And I don't think it was supposed to be leaked, but it got leaked to the newspapers and they publicized it. Some of the suggestions were raising the FERS employees' contribution rate. So that means FERS employees should be contributing more, but getting the same amount of money that they are outlined to get today. So that's just like giving away money. Eliminating the FERS annuity supplement. And now I get the most calls about that. You know, the supplement that you get until you turn 62 while you're retired, you get an additional supplement. And at age 62, you're eligible for Social Security. But they want to eliminate the supplement. Another concern, they want to base the first retirement annuity benefit on a high 5 salary instead of a high 3. So you would get less money at retirement. They want to move the federal employees' health benefit and fund, including the Postal Service health benefit, from a premium share that we pay, which is a model, type of premium that we pay, to a voucher system, to a voucher model. They would give us a certain amount of money. I guess when it runs out, you would have to borrow, or you couldn't get the medicine, or you couldn't get the treatment that your doctors say you need. But they want to give us a voucher. They want this plan, like I said, it was 50 pages. They want charging a fee for federal employees' MSBB appeals. They want to convert new federal workers to at-will employment unless they accept the higher FERS contribution rate. So at-will employees is they hire you at will and they can fire you at will. You know, no grievances, they hire you and they can fire you for not just cause. And the seventh thing that concerns us is they want to eliminate official time for employees to perform union-related duties on the clock. So they don't want you to be able to file a grievance. And that's in writing. There are suggestions that they are thinking, how do they cut this $2 trillion in government spending, $2 trillion. In addition, cuts to Medicare and Medicaid would be needed to meet this resolution level budget cut. Thankfully, none of these cuts that I just named are set in law or are official or in writing as a bill right now, because the House and the Senate must first pass identical budget resolutions, one in the House and one in the Senate. Since the Senate passed their own resolution last Friday, it doesn't look anything like this. The House and the Senate will now have to negotiate to create one identical budget resolution that can pass. Once passed by both chambers, a process called reconciliation starts, which is how the budget becomes law. Reconciliation only requires a simple majority vote in the House and the Senate. So without this reconciliation, the Senate requires 60 votes to pass, which would mean it'll have to be both parties. It couldn't be just one party voting for it. So they don't want that. They would rather the 50+1 in the Senate, which could be done by one party. Of course, the party that is in office right now is the Republican Party, as opposed to the normal 60 votes needed in the Senate. Since the House, Senate, and White House are controlled by the same party, reconciliation is being used to avoid any input from the other party. Reconciliation is rare. It has only been used 23 times since it began in 1974. House Speaker Mike Johnson said that the new reconciliation budget will be ready around early May. However, on Friday, March 14th, the government is gonna run out of money and shut down if they don't have a bill. So he's already said that this bill is not even gonna be ready until May. So to avoid the shutdown, Congress will have to pass something called the CR, continuing resolution. Now what most people don't understand, this CR, this continuing resolution, is temporary. It's a spending bill, and it doesn't make sense for them to keep kicking this CR down the road, because this bill, this budget, was supposed to have been done last year, and it wasn't. So now we're looking at a gap. We're looking at, they're gonna get a budget ready, maybe by May. And there's a threat that the government might shut down on March 14th. Since the federal budget for the fiscal year for 2025, that's what they're talking about, began October 1st, 2024, they have had 2 separate CRs already. Your legislative department is monitoring the budget process, and we will update you when we know more. Right now, however, we have an urgent request that you pay attention to what's going on. Make sure that you look at reliable sources for information. You already know about House Res 70, House Resolution 70, because we've been running emails about it. We've been asking you to call your member of Congress about it. It expresses the sense of the House of Representatives that the Congress should not do anything against the post office, should take all the appropriate measures to ensure that the United States Postal Service remains an independent establishment of the federal government, not subject to privatization. When we've asked you to call your members of Congress in the House of Representation, and because this resolution only exists in one house right now, it's not in the Senate right now, but it will be great if both sides of the aisle just commit to, hey, we're gonna fight to make sure that the Postal Service remains independent. And the bill was introduced in a bipartisan way. Republican, 2 members of the Republican Party and 2 members of the Democratic Party. Because when we lobby Congress, we don't look for a D or an R. We tell our members, our elected members, how we feel about issues. We let them know if we support an issue, we ask them to support that issue also. If we don't support an issue, we talk to them about that too. And we tell them that we don't support it, and we ask them not to support it and not to vote for it. So it's important to know that if you go online right now, however, you won't see the House Resolution 70 on our hotline at all. And you might say, well, why? Because we put up a brand new message to you to ask your members of Congress to do something that's urgent concerning what's going on today. We've asked you to put everything that you're doing, you know, that you think is important, and make this like the #1 issue. And President Demosthenes is on the call right now, and he explains to you on our hotline. And you might say, what hotline? And I hope everybody on this call already have called the hotline periodically, and that has helped us with other fights. And that hotline number, as you know, is 1-844-402-1001. And our fight today is to make sure that the United States Senate understands that they're the ones that approve the Postal Board of Governors. They're the ones that put the Postal Board of Governors in place. They're the ones that should stand up and tell the president, you're not going to fire the Postal Board of Governors, nor are you going to put the Postal Service in the Department of Commerce. So it's important that you help us with that fight. And we also have an email that you can send to help us with the fight. And it's right on the screen, Fight Back Now, Tax Defend 91990. So at the end of this call, We want you to make sure that you make the phone call. Make sure that you text the postal members of Congress, but particularly the Senate, but text them all. Everybody should be doing everything they can to protect the people's post office. It doesn't belong to the federal government, it belongs to the American people. And thank you, President Dimmerstein, for allowing me to make these remarks to our members, and I'm sure they're ready to fight. Turning it back to you.
Thank you so much, Director Beard. Let me segue to that, to a few things we're doing, and I want to get to some of the questions and answers. We promised we'd be done at 8:30 Eastern time. If people want to stay on longer, we're game, but I'd like to wrap up at least for some of the people that we promised a set time for. So Director Beard already talked about some of the steps. So let's talk about the steps going forward. She talked about House Res 70, talked about calling the members of Congress. I think we can add to that, when your congressional reps are on recess and back home, set up meetings and bring delegations of workers and maybe community folks who use the post office to understand how important it is. The most significant presentation at the NALC rally on Monday was a customer who uses the post office to have a small NGO of tying middle school students to scientists, and they do pen pal stuff through the mail. That's the message that our people need to hear. And the advantage of seeing people in person is, one of our strengths is our members represent the entire political spectrum. So we had members that supported every candidate from any political party. This is our time to go in and talk to them and say, hey, we need you to be here for us. So we really want you to hold those meetings. Gather customer stories like the one I just told about. Take a short video. You know, without the post office, my small business couldn't survive. I'm in rural America. We just got a story from a worker whose mother is ill, lives in a rural state, and the only way she can get her medicine, because it's specialized, is either through the mail or through FedEx, and the mail costs $3 and FedEx costs $20. If it's not coming through the mail, she would have to go 100 miles. Those kind of stories are the stories we need to tell. We shouldn't be talking to each other. We need to talk to the people of the country. For those, and we hope you all are, at the local and state level, who are involved with the Central Labor Councils and the state federations of the AFL-CIO, bring these issues to them, get them involved. Talk to your community groups. Those of you who are involved with your church or your synagogue or your mosque, your PTA, your veterans organization, a book club, whatever it is. And one interesting thing, I mentioned a poll this year. We did a poll in, I guess it was 2020. No, I'm sorry, 2018. And one of the things we found from the poll is the people of the country trust what postal workers say to them about what's going on, and trust what the American Postal Workers Union says about what's going on. So let's use our trust and our influence to spread the word. Supporting the Board of Governors, I already talked about. And you can go to apw.org/action, and there will be a page that shares all of you, including the petition now that we're asking people to send in to Congress. So that, I think, just got posted today. And also, if you want to use the talking points, those are now on that page as well. It's great to have interviews at our level. We spread the word the best we can. But we also want local news stories, and we want local TV interviews. And we do it from the heart. It's not always easy, but we do it from the heart because we have a message that the people of the country need to hear. So that's some of the things that we have in place. The next big thing, though, and then I'll turn it over to some questions and answers, is we are calling, the executive board is completely behind this, we are calling a National Day of Action in the field around the country on probably March 20th. It'll be the 19th and 20th. We think it'll be March 20th, which is a Thursday. The letter carriers are doing something on a Sunday. A Sunday is not a very good day to get press coverage. If we're talking to ourselves, let's do it when we can't get any press. If we're talking to ourselves, let's do it when there are no postal customers. If we're talking to the people of the country, let's get out there when they're out there. So we will move into action probably tomorrow on this. I'm gonna reach out to the other unions. One of the questions was about working with the other unions. We should, as best as we can. We can't make them make this a joint rally. That's what we're gonna ask them tonight or tomorrow morning. Let's do it all together. If they don't, fine, not fine, but that's the way it is. We're gonna do it. And the national will take care of signage and will take care of a lot of things, get it out. We have great PR people. Our communications department that put this together is doing a great job. We can provide all the, just imagine, we had 800 rallies in the summer of 2020. Imagine what that would be if we could replicate even close to that now. And every rally has a news story. Every local newspaper in small town America has a news story. Every local news station has a news story. This is the way we counter the Wells Fargos and the Elon Musks and the Howard Lutnicks of the world. Go out with the people, this is their post office, build that unity and stop them in their tracks. But with that, I go to Stephen DiMatteo, my assistant, who's gathered some questions together. Stephen, you want to start sharing some of those questions? We're not going to get to them all tonight, but we'll get to as many as we can.
Thanks, President Dennison. Indeed, we got hundreds of questions in advance of the meeting and several hundred more through the course of it. So we've tried to pick out some that are most representative of the trends that we saw through the many questions we got. And the first one is from Carol Phelps from Boston Metro. Carol asks, even though we have certain protections in place, can we really stop the administration from doing what they want? Because it seems like they are barreling through other agencies, even though they are being slowed by various litigations across the country. So can they succeed in the end with the Postal Service? I would love your fair assessment. Question from Carol.
Well, that's a very good question. I'm sure it's on all of our minds. I guess the best answer I can give all is there's one way to guarantee that they win and we lose, and that's not fight. If when we fight, and we will fight, we're not guaranteed that we're going to win, but we have a real chance of winning. And when we add in, Carol, the fact that the people of the country really do support their public postal service, even with some ongoing problems with the mail and so on, when we take into account our allies in the community, our allied organizations, we can take into account how much the people trust postal workers, when we take into account that we're everywhere. And so all of these politicians have to take into account the impact on their constituents and therefore themselves about if we indeed allow and sit back and allow the Commerce Department to do a hostile takeover and the corporations to do a hostile takeover. We have a lot of ammo. And so, you know, my appeal is we fight. We've had many fights in the past. We're not going to win every battle, but I'm a firm believer that united with the people of the country that we can win this battle. And you know, it's such a big issue. Like maybe 10 or 12 years ago, I don't remember exactly when. In Japan, they privatized the post office, and in the next election, the ruling party that did that was actually voted out of office after like 40 years. And the question of the post office was one of the primary reasons. So these politicians have to take us into account as well. You are right, Carol. They're barreling fast and furious, shock and awe. That's part of their plan. How do you fight? What do we do next? And so that's one of the reasons we haven't rolled out everything in one day. Because again, we know it's not a one-day battle or 1 week battle or 1 month battle, but we also have to pick our shots. And when we move, we want to move with real, not just unity, but focus in that area that we know we can make a serious impact. So I'm optimistic, but I can't sit here and guarantee we'll win. But I don't think they're going to easily take out something as beloved to the people of the country. And hear how ironic it is. And this is one of the things we talk about in the press. We're about to celebrate this summer, and that is one thing that I left out in the things that we're doing. We're working on a massive 250th anniversary celebration this summer and on July 26th. And part of the reason we're doing that, we're gonna put in resources, money and time, is because of what's going on with this anti-federal worker hollowing out these government services, including trying to hollow out the government services that we provide. So here we are, fabric of the country. Yes, it's changing. It's changed throughout the generations, but still so invaluable to the people of the country. We're going to counter those celebrations. Happy anniversary, Postal Service. We're going to be here for you for another 250 years. And so we can counter a lot of their crap. And then they're going to have to come through the people of the country. So that's the best answer I can give. It's a very good question, but we don't want people to be discouraged, but we're gonna have to fight the best way and the right way that we can.
Ready for your next one, President D?
Sure.
All right, this comes from Jesus Gonzalez. He's in Charleston, West Virginia. Jesus asks, how can members in deep red states try to influence Republican members of Congress to support the Postal Service?
Very good question. Look, I'm not a fan of the red-blue stuff, so that's just my opinion. I think it divides us as working people. But that aside, we know that in most of the rural states right now, in the political landscape of the United States, most of them are represented in Congress by Republican House and Senate folks, and in many cases, governors as well. But here's the connection. Here's how we convince people. Tell those stories about the customers and talk about how important the Postal Service is to rural America and how no private company will do in rural America what we're bound to do by law and our mission. There's no way UPS, FedEx, DHL, Amazon, whoever else it is gonna move a package that they can't make money on. And down the dirt road in Vermont where my sister lives, they're not gonna make money on most of those packages. And so part of the appeal to the representatives of the more conservative states, which are often the more rural states, is exactly that deep connection between rural America. Often there's less internet. And think about if you're a small business in rural America, or you're selling Etsy or eBay. Think about what Wells Fargo said. They're salivating over the idea that if this thing is taken private, the package rates will go up, and that'll be good for their investors, right? It's not going to be good for the people of the country, especially the people in rural America. So I think there's a natural affinity and connection between postal workers in rural America, the customers in rural America, and the people who are elected in rural America. And sometimes folks, and Judy Beard and I do this all the time, we'll go on Capitol Hill. And we'll talk to people that are against working people and unions on almost every issue. But when we stick to the post office, we got a lot of friends. And we got to build those relationships. And that's going to be very, very important. And that's why your question is so good and important. Very important, especially important in a time where the White House is driving, and the Heritage Foundation, let's not forget them, and UPS, let's not forget them, are driving this new thrust of postal privatization. And while some people are saying, well, they're really not going to privatize, you see what Wells Fargo is jumping on the bandwagon, you see what Bezos and the Washington Post did. They think this might be their time, and we got to make sure it's not. Back to you, Steve.
Sure. The next question comes from Tara Pickle in the Denver area local. Tara asks, how can we better organize local union members who are feeling hopeless and see our union as a third-party service provider rather than an organization composed of and controlled by us, the members?
Oh, that's another very good question. You know, that third-party relationship is a huge problem for us. You know, the idea that some of the members just look at us as taking care of their grievance, taking care of their problem, or some kind of lawyer, some kind of social worker, some kind of insurance agents. And we always try to impress upon people that we're strongest when everybody gets out of the stands and are not spectators and are playing on the field, right? And so this is a time I think we can really explain to our people that our big fights like this are outside of our contract, over and above our contract. And if we're going to win these fights in the political arena, in the streets with the people of the country, on Capitol Hill and governor's offices and everything else, everybody needs to be involved. And by the way, as an aside, I think this is a good time to talk to those non-members about being in the union, because their jobs are just as much on the line as everybody else. Those union rights that they won't pay for are on the line. Imagine if, in the APWU, if they do away, if the government does away with dues checkoff. We'll find a way to rebuild. It's not going to be easy. Or we don't have union time or stewards time anymore, or maybe even a right to file a grievance. So I think this is a good time to talk to people about the only way we can win this thing is if we fight back together and we build the kind of power, not as the APW alone, but build the kind of power that we can beat these. Hey, look, there's no question that when you're dealing with UPS and Amazon and Wells Fargo, they're powerful. But there's a whole lot more of us than them. Steve.
Sure. The next question comes from Trevor Farragut. He asked it in the Q&A tonight. Trevor says, generally speaking, people won't care until it affects them. How do you suggest we transform our position from an abstract legal situation to a more personal one that would mobilize the membership as well as the public?
Again, another very good question. I think we have to tell people the truth about privatization. I think there's some confusion out there. It sounds good. It's a term that there's a lot of propaganda around by the corporate and financial entities, and this idea that maybe the private sector can do it more efficiently. And we probably had members that say, well, if it's privatized, I'll just go work for somebody else and I'll have the same rights and benefits. So I think part of the appeal to our people is to explain, no, we're not crying wolf. That's why I showed you some of those earlier slides from McDougall of UPS and others. It's real. It's an ongoing battle. And we've shown that we can push back and succeed. But we're not going to be able to do it without maximum participation and power. So I think this is, it's certainly a very good question, because some of the people may say, well, hell, they'll probably deliver mail if we're under the commerce thing. Who cares if it's the PMG? Maybe I don't like the PMG anyway. So, the commerce secretary may not be any different. I like him, but we'll come to work and get paid. We're not going to have a contract, folks, if we're not the United States Postal Service. And our members need to understand it. And they need to understand that we can't put our heads in the sand no matter our personal political beliefs. They're coming for us. And somehow we have to impress upon the members that this is very real. Judy Beard's presentation about there's a connection between the attacks on Capitol Hill on our first Constitution. That would be a pay cut. Plain and simple. Stone cold pay cut. The attack on our future retirements with the supplement. Stone cold cut where the hard-earned benefits and promises made. This is going to touch everybody. And it's the same forces that are pushing that bill, by the way, so they can get their trillions of dollars of corporate and wealthy tax cuts off our backs. Same people who are pushing that are pushing the privatization agenda, and they are connected. And I would advocate also that the part of the way to get people to see this is to give them the things to do to fight back, the kind of list that we had here. Go and meet with your congresspeople. Send a letter that's online, easy to do. Make a phone call, make a difference. But it's always a challenge to get people involved, and it's a challenge to get people to understand that this is real. And so I just think we have to share the information, be truthful about it, explain privatization, and expose when a guy like Ludnick, the Commerce Secretary, says, oh, we just want to do things like the census, that they don't have to take over the post office to do government work. So there's something much more sinister at play when they say, yeah, to do it, we're going to have to seize the post office from its rightful owners, i.e. the American people. But I don't have any easy answers, except we have to educate, we have to talk, we have to organize, we have to mobilize.
Great, thanks, President Dempsey. The next question came from Danita Barr. Danita asked, how does PMG DeJoy's resignation and the vacancies on the Board of Governors affect us going forward? And who do you think will be appointed to these seats?
I'll start with the seats on the Board of Governors. It's a very bad thing, in my opinion, that this president there's 4 vacancies on the Board of Governors, and soon there may be 5. That means that when we talked about the executive order, potential executive order, and it was in place, they didn't issue it, they pulled it back because they maybe want to make it stronger for them, or maybe they're getting a little cold feet because there's so much resistance already. Stephen, go ahead with that question. I'm sorry, I get so excited I lost my train of thought there for a second. Go ahead.
How do the Joy's resignations and the
Oh,
vacancies on the board affect this situation?
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, really excellent question. So I was starting to talk about the EO. So the EO would say, we're just going to fire them all. There's another path, and that is that the president could just appoint the worst of nominees who will do his bidding. And we already know from the Senate that they will confirm anybody, whether qualified or not, that any nomination, thus far anyway, that he has made. So what they may do is not do the executive order directly. They just may appoint the most vicious, anti-public post office people to the board. The board sets policy, control the board, then fire whatever PMG they want to, and then take it from there. So they have a few different paths, and we're going to try to very much influence the best we can who the next governors are. But most of that control is going to be in the hands of the president. The resignation of the PMG will have an impact. There's a lot of strong opinions on him. I don't think he proved to be a privatizer. We don't have to agree with every change that he's making, even if we understand need for change in a changing world of communications with the internet. But think about the fact that he was undoubtedly pushed out. And so that ought to tell you something, that the world of the Heritage Foundation and the world of UPS and the world of FedEx and Wells Fargo doesn't want him in that position. And they don't want him in that position because he's an obstacle to their ends. There's also probably some angst from the administration in relation to the very successful 2020 vote by mail. And while we had deep concerns and fought back as a people and as a union in the summer of 2020 and forced the PMG's hands to do the right thing, at the end of the day, he did do the right thing. And it's possible he's never been forgiven for that. We know, I don't care who you voted for, if anybody's honest about it, the 2020 election was not stolen. But if people really believe it was, then they can blame postal workers, vote by mail, and so on. So, it's whoever the next postmaster is, we would have to be very, very cautious and very, very concerned that that person could be an outright privatizer brought in to do what the President of the United States wanted to do in 2018, which was to prepare the post office to be broken up and sold off to private corporations. The worst scenario that could happen to us and the people of the country when it comes to this kind of democratic right. Stephen, anything else? I know we got a bunch, so
Sure do. This question
try to move quickly here and get as much in as we can.
That's right. This question comes from Alice Lindstrom in San Francisco. Alice noted that she was on strike in 1970, and then she asked her question, allied organizations are inquiring about setting up supportive actions regularly outside of post offices and asking. Her question is, do we want them?
We always welcome support. I think it would be good if it's coordinated some. Our day of action that will probably be on the March 20th is a perfect opportunity. Locals are going to do some of their own things. They may, for instance, just decide in a particular week or one day every week that they're going to pass out a flyer at a different post office to alert the customers as to the dangers ahead, if in fact this administration gets their way. So yes, we definitely want the support, but it's good to do it together and it's good to be organized. And one of the reasons we want to do something sooner rather than later in terms of rallying in the streets is not only are our members saying, what can we do to fight back? And that's a great response. But a lot of our friends and allies are saying, what can we do to fight back? So by the way, Alice and all, the petition that's out also went out to our allies. And the allies are moving it. So there are allies like Social Security Works. that may generate 100,000 responses from their membership base. So we're not gonna win this without allies. So we cherish them, but if we can work together to get it focused and pointed, that's probably the best thing. But if it's spontaneous and people wanna go out to the post office every week on their own, we're certainly not gonna say that don't do it. And for those who don't know, Alice is in the 50th anniversary video of the Great Postal Strike. So thanks Alice for representing. You're probably not the only person on the call that's been on strike. And by the way, this is not just an active postal employees issue. This could affect retirees, some of the attacks that are coming down on the federal sector, on FERS, on feed. Those things could affect our retirees. Those are promises, those are laws, but let's be real about it. Laws can change. I mean, you had the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and now it's been gutted by Congress and the Supreme Court. So we have to be very vigilant, and we have to be in this together. And on this calls, we have actives, we have retirees, we've got auxiliary members, and which organizes our family members and friends. We're gonna have to do this all together. Back to you, Stephen.
Sure, this question comes from Rick Barreto. Rick asks, how do we identify veterans in the Postal Service and mobilize them in the struggle and amplify their voices, given the public has a high regard for veterans?
Another very good question, Rick. Look, we are, if not either the first or second entity that hires the most veterans. There's over 70,000 veterans in the Postal Service ranks. And so the question of the value of the post office, one of the ways we really talk to people about that, it should continue, is let's say medicines for veterans. 90% of VA medicines are run through the post office. Many of those veterans live in rural areas. And so how do we take care of our veterans if you don't have this wonderful national treasure to serve them? So I think it's a very good point. And I also think that when you talk about like delegations with going to see your Congress people, make sure there's some veterans in the mix that can talk about their situation, what, you know, their contributions, and maybe then we have a lot of disabled veterans. So it's important that we get that voice heard. Letters to the editors, you may have some that focus on the veteran issue. When we gather in front of post offices on the 20th, we'll have press releases ready. We'll raise the veteran piece right in there as well. Very good point that I think everybody should keep in mind as we fight back and fight together.
Okay, I think we will make this our last question before we pass back to Secretary Treasurer Powell. This came from someone in the Q&A tonight who asked, what options do we have at the local level to fight this attack from the post office? And here's the unique part of the question. How do we convince senior members on the edge of retirement to care about this fight?
Well, I'm not sure I have all the answers to that, honestly. I think that a lot of senior members are very dedicated to the mission and dedicated to the people. So I think that's part of how we capture people. There's always a tendency, if we're a little older and ready for retirement, that maybe we wind down on some of the daily struggles. But I don't think anybody wants to see what they put their heart and soul and blood, sweat, and tears into all the years just be lost. And I think you'll find with our senior folks a real how we can appeal to people. We also have the question of solidarity. Always a battle to build, but we need solidarity from those whose careers are winding down with those who are just getting started. And then both of those solidarities become solidarity with the people of the country and their rights. We should never forget that this is a right of the people. And then on top of it, when that person retires, they want good mail service. They want reasonable and uniform prices. And so they're going to become maybe more customers than workers. And as retirees, they're also going to make sure that their benefits that they've earned through blood, sweat, and tears are there for them going forward. And the more we can protect the institutions and the more we can protect the contributions of the federal workers, the more our retirements will be protected going forward as well. So that's some of the best I could come up with off of the top of my head, but I think that's another very good question.
Thanks, President Dimmonstein. And we are taking note of all of the questions, and we'll try to address them in other ways going forward. But with that, I would like to bring back our wonderful Secretary Treasurer, Ms. Elizabeth Powell.
Thank you, Stephen. And hello, everybody, once again. We started off this program with what's going on. And hopefully throughout the conversations and what you've heard from President Dimmonstein, Legislative Director Beard, and some of the Q&As, you now have an idea of some of the things that's going on. While we're not completely sure of everything, we're going to definitely keep our eyes and our ears open. We ask that you all do the same out there, because like I always say, they come for them today, it will be us tomorrow, and it's always ready a few steps toward going that way. Remember that whatever happens with other unions, we're not protected. The United States Postal Service is under threat once again. But the American Postal Workers Union, as you all know, we're union strong all day long, and we're going to do everything that we can to protect not only you and your rights, but the United States Postal Service, which actually belongs to the people. Before I turn it over to President Dimmonstein to close us out, let me thank all of our national officers who are with us this evening, our National Executive Board, our National Executive Council, our 2 interpreters who have been with us throughout the evening, our Chief Counsel Minnie, who has been here, and mostly the hard-working people behind putting this webinar together. We have Madeline, our Senior Communications Director, Hannah and Annette, Executive Assistant to the Secretary Treasurer. We have JC, who works for the Communications Department. We have Stephen, the Executive Assistant to President Dimmonstein. And once again, thank you all so very much. And remember, we're not an island. We're not in this by ourselves. Keep the faith, stay strong, and we're gonna do everything that we can, once again, to fight for what's right. With that, I give you once again the President of the American Postal Workers Union, Mark Dimmonstein.
Well, so well said, Secretary Treasurer Powell, so I'm not going to repeat it. I just want to say this to everybody. Not only thanks for everything you do day in and day out, thanks for getting on tonight. Look, I think it's okay to be worried, concerned, angry, maybe at times a little overwhelmed and discouraged, seeing what's going on. But let's be clear that we can rally. Our strength is in our unity. Our strength is in our solidarity, and we can overcome and we can win. We don't want what's coming down on us fast and furious to divide us up, to discourage us, to think we're alone. As Sister Powell said so well, we're not an island with each other, and we're not an island in relation to the rest of the working class. So I'll leave you on 2 quotes. One is from Tommy Douglas, the most famous and beloved, although he's long deceased, but still the most beloved politician of Canada, who was the founder of their Labour Party, the National Democratic Party. And I think his saying that he's so well known for is fitting for the moment. He said, "Courage, my friends. 'Tis not too late to build a better world." And Joe Hill, our labor troubadour and union fighter from the early of the last century, who was actually framed up and executed by the copper bosses. And before he was executed, his last words to us were, "Don't mourn, organize." So APWU family, we're not gonna mourn, we're gonna fight back, we're gonna do it together, and we plan to win. With that, thanks again so much. Be well, be safe, be in the fight, share any ideas you have with us, because we don't have all the answers. We're unified as a national leadership. We encourage all of you to unify at the local and state levels. We can put other differences and problems aside for other times. This is the fight of our lifetime. So carry on, everybody. solidarity forever, and thanks again for joining us tonight.
Good night, everybody.
Oh, shit. That was interesting. Y'all off the chain. What y'all doing? That was, let's see what we got here. Lead webinar. Y'all crazy. Damn, comments is off the, yo. Woo! What did we learn? What did we learn? What did we learn? We learned absolutely nothing. That was a lot of wordplay. He gave some information, right? And when asked direct questions, he gave the same answer. We gave the same answer. We gotta fight like hell. We're not sure, but we gotta fight like hell. One thing's for certain and two things for sure. We gotta fight like hell. The most entertaining part of that was the sign language. And I was over there on my tablet and I was reading I was reading y'all comments. That was the most entertaining part of it. And you know, honestly, I like Diamondstein, but don't come on here and preach the same thing that I've been talking about. What you're doing right now when you do that is like damage control. You should be out there on the forefront. You at the top of the ticket. And you're supposed to be out there talking to people, let people know, hey, this is what's going on. I want you to know we're working our hardest to try to get to you know, and make sure you all get the information. We don't know everything yet, but as we know, don't listen to all them other people. What we're gonna do is, as soon as I get some information, I'll update you. It may not be every day, it may be a 5-minute clip. I'm gonna update you every other day. That's what they're supposed to do. At least keep the members aware. Now, that's the APWU. We couldn't get Renfro on because he is too busy. He's out there fighting like hell, whatever that means. He's occupied, fighting like hell. I like the fact that they're out there in front of people now. You know, when I called them out, you know, months ago, and I said, y'all gotta be more transparent because you just leaving room for idiots like me to talk some shit. Now they out there being transparent. Great. But if you're being transparent, say something. Say something. Say, well, that's a hard question to answer. I sent my question in too. I sent my question in too, but they didn't read it. But don't worry. I got James Henry coming on Saturday evening. I had a conversation with him. I said, look, I don't do all that petty stuff. I don't do that stuff. We're going to chop it up. I'm going to give you them questions that you may not like, but the people ask them. So if you're on 8 p.m. Saturday evening, I had other plans, but I'm making it for him, and you decide you want to type some questions, so long as it's not rude, we're going to ask them. We're going to put them on Front Street. Everybody said James Henry, so let's talk to him. We're going to find out what's going on in life. All right. I didn't really want to be talking. I just wanted y'all to see that. Took me forever to get in that damn meeting, and I wasn't going to go behind the scenes and try to translate that, so you got to watch it. All right. I got a lot of damn people that were trying to text me at the same time. I appreciate y'all. A lot of people don't really care for me because I have a brash, you know, kind of way that I deliver my message. I'm not scripted. Kind of goes off the top of the dome. Sometimes I can apologize. Sometimes I can't. I talk to you like I'm talking to you. If I met you in person, this is how we're going to chop it up. And that's who I'm going to remain. I'm not out here trying to get an applause. I'm doing it for a cause. And the cause is because I want to see all of you somehow come together. We can't agree for everything, but we can agree to disagree and somehow come up with the same terms. We need better money, better working conditions, better something for our family. You know what I mean? I can't read the comments because you know damn well I can't see. That's why I had something on. Alrighty then. Now I look stupid. All right, and I'm not even gonna try and read it. But look, Y'all be easy, and we out of here. My son's not here. I don't know how to shut this damn camera off. We need more sign language interpreters. That shit was funny. That was funny. All right. Did he say Coke bottles? Did you say Coke bottles? We're going to talk about that contract thing as well. We're going to talk about that contract thing because it seems like, you know, what's going on in the politics right now is taking people away from the fact that there's still a tentative agreement that hasn't been agreed upon. You know what I mean? We ain't going to sit there and drift off of that. I'm going to get right into it. I'm like, yo, what's up with the contract, bitch? I was supposed to get a bunch of nice Christmas gifts this year from my kids and my nephew and my sister, bitch. But they ain't had enough money in their bank account, bitch. They carriers, they put up underneath you, bitch. How come you ain't get them no more money, bitch? Even though his name is James Henry. That's how animated I'm gonna be. What's really popping, bitch? I only got half a gift. I usually get a stash of gifts. All right, enough of the shit talking. I'll talk to y'all later. All right, it's Jay.